Hello, and welcome to the 61st Conference of Midwest Model United Nations. My name is Jamie Klein-Sorge, and I serve as the president of the board of directors. I am excited to join you today, virtually, to kick off the conference. MMUN 61 is my 20th conference, and that surely dates me if my side part doesn't. But this is the first one I've ever experienced online. And while I'll surely miss greeting you all in person each day and shaking your hands, I want to acknowledge and commend everyone for their continued sacrifices to help curb the spread of COVID-19. We recognize that an online simulation is not ideal, but it is the right choice to help us curb the spread of the virus, save lives, and help us get back to in-person debating and consensus building in 2022. I would like to take a quick moment to thank my fellow board members. Alicia Kennedy, our vice president, Kimberly Clapp, our treasurer, David Willis, Andrew Caprell, and Zach Crow, our members at large, Matthew Kitzman, our general counsel, and our three faculty board members, Dr. Cheryl Vanden Handel, Dr. Brian Kessel, and Dr. Mark Elrod. I would also like to take a moment to thank the MMUN 61 Steering Committee and staff. There are no words to describe how grateful we are for all the time, effort, and likely the blood, sweat, and tears that went into planning, replanning, and so much more to make this conference possible online. Without your heart, your passion, dedication, and a penchant for rules and procedure, we wouldn't be kicking off MMUN 61 today. Thank you all, especially the MMUN 61 Steering Committee, Chase Mitchell, Lindsay Tyson, Lachlan Swanson, and Anthony Bassi. You have all shown exceptional leadership, the ability to be flexible, and demonstrated your commitment to this organization and its values. Thank you again. I'm excited to also take this opportunity to introduce our two keynote speakers for MMUN 61. First is Irfan Saeed, the Deputy Coordinator at the Bureau of Counterterrorism at the United States Department of State. Mr. Saeed manages offices that lead strategy and policy formulation for international terrorism prevention efforts, as well as international detention issues. He also serves as the director of the Office of Countering Violent Extremism. We are so grateful to have Mr. Saeed here with us at Midwest Model United Nations. We also have Akin Aytekin. Akin is a financial journalist based in Istanbul. He is an alumni of Midwest Model United Nations, serving as a delegate and a staffer while at Westminster College in Fulton, Missouri. Since his return to Turkey, Akin has worked for places like the Wall Street Journal, Thomson Reuters, Bloomberg HT, and has now shifted his focus to behavioral economics. It is my pleasure to welcome Akin back to Midwest Model United Nations. Thank you all again for joining us for MMUN 61, our very first virtual conference. I hope to see you all around the Gatherly platform this week and back in St. Louis in 2022. Thank you.
Hello, Midwest Model UN. My name is Irfan Saeed. I'm the director of the Office of Countering Violent Extremism, the Bureau of Counterterrorism, U.S. Department of State. Before that, I served as a senior advisor at the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. And before that, I was an assistant United States attorney for the Department of Justice. So I've been around government a very long time, almost 20 years, and yet I can tell you I am so jealous of each one of you here today. Let me tell you why. It's about 5 years ago when I joined the State Department, and one of my first missions was to go to the United Nations General Assembly meeting, and I was there to support the ambassador for the United Nations, and we had prepared a series of remarks for her, and I was to be her plus one. That meant I was supposed to sit behind her, pass her notes, and maybe give her some guidance as needed while she was addressing the General Assembly. So we were all prepped, we were ready to go, gave her all the notes she needed, And I sat right back behind her, and I just started looking around this amazing room in New York. You know the room I'm talking about, with the big green marble where all the world leaders have been. And here I was, you know, a long-time government bureaucrat, but it's the first time I got to be at the United Nations. So I'm sitting back, taking it all in, and my boss, the UN ambassador, is providing the remarks. And then she turns around when she's finished and she says, I have another meeting to go to, you take the chair. And so I said, sure, I'll take the chair. So I settle into her chair, I look around, and now I'm representing the United States of America. And then it dawned on me, no idea what I'm doing. So I start to look around to see if someone can help me here, and I see an intern sitting in the back. And so I go over to the intern and I say, hey, what am I supposed to do here? And the intern looks at me kind of puzzled and says, didn't you do Model UN? It's just like that. Alas, I did not do Model UN, and I had no idea what to do. So again, you guys are in a much better position than I was at that time, and I hope that you take these lessons with you today, no matter what you do. But hopefully, if you do have a career in the State Department or the United Nations, hopefully this time at the Model UN really serve you well, serve you better than what happened to me 5 years ago. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do and why it's so important for the United Nations to play a role in the things that we do. So as mentioned, I work in the Bureau of Counterterrorism. And one of the things we try to do is work bilaterally with countries to ensure that they have the tools that they need to push back on violent extremism and terrorism. But we also work multilaterally. We work with a lot of different organizations who can bring other countries to the table. And that's the importance of the UN. They are the multilateral body that can bring the world together to discuss a variety of issues. And the issue that I care about the most is counterterrorism. So if you harken back a few years, 2014, 2015, 2016, there was a time when the terrorist group ISIS was at its height. And this is something that we were all concerned about. Every country around the world, we started to see hundreds of thousands of kids disappearing from their homes, literally disappearing from their homes, and showing up in a foreign conflict zone in Syria and Iraq to join a terrorist organization. Now imagine that for a second. You're a parent and you knock on your kid's door to wake them up for school and say, hey, it's time to get ready to go to school, and you open the door and there's nobody in there. So you look around, you don't find your child, you start calling the child's friends. Hey, is my son or daughter over there? And they realize that their son or daughter is also missing. And this happened in houses around the world where parents were waking up to find that their children were disappearing. And after we started to do some investigating to figure out what was happening, we were learning that they were slowly being radicalized, and they bought into this ideology that they needed to go join ISIS. So they would all disappear from their homes, get on planes, fly to Turkey and other parts of Europe, and then try to make their way into Syria to join the fight for ISIS. That is not a good thing. And it was happening everywhere around the world. So, as I said, the United States would work bilaterally with countries to sort of help them understand how they can push back on this radicalization. But more importantly, we needed to get the United Nations involved. So the United States led a series of negotiations through the United Nations Security Council to ensure that we were all on the same page when it came to understanding how to push back on this radicalization and recruitment. There's a lot of negotiation that happens at the United Nations, and there's different ways of having resolutions. You can have a UN Security Council resolution. You can have a UN General Assembly resolution. There are a lot of different ways of having this conversation. But what we understood was that for us to really tackle this problem as a global community, we had to go through the United Nations and get a Security Council resolution, which under Article 25 is binding, which means that if you're a signatory and you're a part of the United Nations, and then there is a UN Security Council resolution that's passed, it's binding upon you as a country to implement those resolutions. So as the United States, we took the lead in trying to negotiate a Security Council resolution on ensuring that all of us around the world knew what to do and knew how to do it in terms of pushing back on the radicalization to recruitment to terrorism that ISIS was doing. And the success we had was in the form of United Nations Security Council Resolution 2396. And that was on foreign terrorist fighters, returnees, and relocators. So I wanted to read to you just a very brief snippet of what this resolution said and why it was so important. Because this resolution set the framework for all of us around the world to better understand how to push back on the recruitment, how to get better laws to ensure that if someone is trying to join a terrorist organization, we have the laws in place to investigate, arrest, and prosecute, but also to stop someone from trying to travel to a foreign terrorist conflict. But it was also about getting better at information sharing with our colleagues around the world, because if we don't know who's doing what and when and how, we're always going to be in second place. So let me just read to you a very quick snippet of what this resolution said and what was binding on a lot of the United Nations partners. Number one, it reaffirms that member states must comply with their human rights and other applicable international law obligations when fighting terrorism, and notes that a failure to do so contributes to radicalization to violence. Number two, expresses grave concern over the acute and growing threat posed by foreign terrorist fighters returning or relocating, particularly from foreign conflict zones, to their countries of origin or to third countries. 3, recognizes the need for domestic law enforcement, intelligence, and counterterrorism agencies within member states to share appropriate information related to foreign terrorist fighters. 4, expresses concern over the use of the internet for terrorist purposes and underlines the need to cooperatively prevent terrorists from exploiting technology to incite support for terrorists. Next, it welcomes the International Civil Aviation Organization, or ICAO, to require the use of what we call advanced passenger information or passenger name recognition to develop a member state's capacity to collect, process, and analyze this type of data. That simply means that if someone is traveling to a conflict zone, if someone's on a plane going somewhere, we should be able to get that information, passenger name recognition or advanced passenger information. This type of information flow happens around the world. We just wanted to ensure that it was increasing at a time when ISIS was increasing their efforts to radicalize, recruit, inspire, and mobilize others to terrorism. And finally, this UN Security Council resolution noted the work of other multilateral bodies, including Interpol and the other UN entities such as ICAO, as I just talked about, the UN Office of Counterterrorism, and the Counterterrorism Executive Directorate, and other relevant actors such as the Global Counterterrorism Forum. So that was 2014, 2015, 2016 when we had this rise of ISIS. This UN Security Council resolution was important that it set the framework for all of us to get on the same page. And I can tell you now, in 2021, the ISIS caliphate has been defeated. ISIS is on the run. It still poses a threat, and we will still work with our UN colleagues around the world, and we will continue to look at other possible resolutions to ensure that we're all on the same page, we have the same framework, but we're winning that battle. I hope that one day that you all are working on important Security Council resolutions, or you're here at the State Department, and I hope that one day we can have you as an intern in this office. So please check out State Department's website, either at careers.state.gov or at state.gov, to ensure that you're finding the right possibilities, you're finding the right internships, and you're moving forward in a career of international diplomacy. Thank you so much for allowing me to take just a few minutes here today. I wish you all the best of luck. Take care.
Honorable delegates, staff, organizers of the 61st Midwest Model United Nations, it's an honor for me to virtually return to St. Louis and to imagine that I'm addressing a full room of delegates, staff, and organizers who have really put their heart into turning this event into reality despite the direst of times. It was exactly 12 years ago at the 49th Midwest Model United Nations that I had become the first student from my college, Westminster College, to win the Michael Stephen Shower Memorial Scholarship with an essay that I wrote on global warming, a prize of $1,000. At the time, as an international student who received no financial support from home or anywhere else, I was struggling to find money for dinner whenever I left the school premises. As someone who received no financial support from somewhere else, the school's dining hall was my safest place for survival. And so after 3 days of intense lobbying, official sessions, and drafting resolutions, I was exhausted. And by the time the last session rolled around, I was already looking forward to going back home and getting some food. When they called upon my name at the awards ceremony at the last day of the 49th Midwest Model United Nations, it was the first time in my life that I held a 4-digit check in my hands. And the first thing that I did was to call my Palestinian roommates from my Indonesian friend's telephone. "Get yourself ready," I told them, "because when I'm back, we're going to get some good breakfast." With the comfort of knowing that I was going to be able to afford food for the next few days, I rested my head on the headrest of the car, closed my eyes, and started rerunning some of the scenes of the Midwest Model United Nations in my head. I started remembering the times when we argued or when we shouted at each other simply because we really wanted to come to an agreement about the conflict that we were dealing with. 1 year after the 49th Midwest Model United Nations, I left the United States and came back to my home country, Turkey, and settled in Istanbul. I started working as a journalist. With wars going on in neighboring countries such as Iraq and Syria, with an ongoing conflict between Turks and the Kurds, an influx of refugees from Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the region, I found myself in a highly polarized society where diplomacy and agreement were becoming things of the past. With ISIS wreaking havoc in Syria, Islamists and secularists becoming more and more intolerant toward each other in Turkey, I noticed a dangerous pattern. A pattern that was dragging us to a point of no return. A pattern that meant only violence and nothing else. Then came the night of July 15th, 2016. At 10 p.m. on a Friday night, I was trying to pick a funny movie to watch while sipping on my second beer. My phone incessantly started to vibrate with one message received each second from work. I was working at Reuters news agency at the time. "I saw tanks heading up the Bosphorus Bridge," said one colleague. "I called the Prime Minister's office. They have no idea what's going on," said a second. "I called the military headquarters. They're not answering," said another. "I called Homeland Security. They had no idea why military vehicles are out in the streets," said another. We knew then and there that there was a military coup happening in the country. As I was reading the messages, I heard a sonic boom just outside my window. F-15 fighter jets were flying over the city, shooting protesters, protesting the coup over the bridge that connected Asia and Europe in Istanbul. All of a sudden, I started looking around my house to see if I had enough water in the house, enough bread, enough ingredients to make food for at least a week in case a civil war broke out. It was a Friday night. I should have been enjoying my beer. The night of July 15th was perhaps the most traumatic experience when I realized what could happen when people refused to sit down to talk. Hundreds of thousands of state workers and military workers had been dismissed following the coup, and until now they have no place to find a job and no place almost to live. Today, not only Turkey, but in many places people refuse to sit down to talk. People refuse to share their bread with a stranger. People refuse to accept opposing views. Today, more than ever, I put my head on the headrest of the car and close my eyes and go back to those times when we were so adamant to come to an agreement, when we were so adamant to compromise, and that's why you're there today. That's why Midwest Model United Nations existed for over half a century. Because the last time we were this intolerant toward each other's ideas, a fascist megalomaniac took over and led to the deaths of more than 70 million people in a world war. I hope that your optimism and your good intentions will be the realities of tomorrow's generations. All the love and respect from Istanbul.
Depending on when you're watching this, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. My name is Chase Mitchell, and it is my pleasure to serve as the Secretary General for the 61st Midwest Model United Nations. Since the last MMUN, we have experienced a collective trauma, one that will likely take years to fully recover from. But still, we come together. The venue may have changed, but your role has not. Over the next few days, most of you will take on the role of diplomats with an impossible mandate. Find common ground to solve the international community's most pressing issues. Your willingness to take on this challenge, at this time, is worthy of praise in and of itself. Thank you so much for the research, preparation, and enthusiasm that you've brought that will make this simulation a success. This conference would also not be possible if not for the work of our volunteer staff. The chairs, legals, and rapporteurs in your committees are all fully prepared to facilitate your work, having already spent numerous hours writing topic guides, reading position papers, and engaging in training to provide all of you the best experience possible. Our volunteer staff is led by a steering committee, consisting of myself and the Assistant and Undersecretaries General, whom I have worked with all year to plan and prepare for the conference. They include Undersecretary General of Administration, Lindsay Tyson, Assistant Secretary General of Administration, Anthony Bassi, and Undersecretary General of Operations, Lachlan Swanson. Lindsay, Anthony, and Lachlan, I feel the need to express my deep gratitude for your work this year. The challenges we faced and difficult decisions we had to make were unparalleled in the history of MMUN, and this conference would not be happening if not for your diligence. Thank you so much for your efforts. A reality of staffing Model UN conferences is that by the time the conference starts, most of our work is behind us. Of course, yours is just about to begin. The task in front of you may seem daunting, but when the first session begins, you should remember that everyone in your committee is in the same position you are. They don't know anyone else. They don't know what's going to happen. But just like you, they've spent hours preparing. They want to make connections to others. And they have a position they want to advocate for. Most importantly, they, like you, want to walk away from this conference having produced something that they can be proud of. The thing that unites all of you in committee, more than anything else, is your shared goal of success. And you should know going in that every other delegate can be your ally, for that reason alone. This shared goal gives you a platform from which you can truly take on the role of a diplomat and give others a chance to unite in consensus. The constant hunt for consensus in a world of disagreement is part of what makes the United Nations such a critical and unique institution. The UN brings together actors that are staunchly opposed with the hope of producing lasting peace and progress through nothing more than conversation and words on a page. Consensus and inclusivity are not aspirations of the United Nations because of some high-minded ideology. They emerged out of necessity and a realization that if everyone isn't included and willing to take action, then things just can't get done. Throughout the conference, your ability to be inclusive will likely be challenged. You will have to work with people who disagree with you. You will struggle to find common ground. But this is expected. In fact, it is the essence of diplomacy. Consensus doesn't come easily, and it requires being deliberate about inclusivity. As you form working groups, I encourage you to think about the standards you set. How will you make sure you're being inclusive? How will you make sure everyone's voice is heard? How will you make sure that everyone can agree with what you produce? If you begin to answer these questions, and if you are deliberate about meeting the needs of everyone that you're working with, then you will truly have begun to think like a diplomat. I wish you the best of luck in your negotiations, and I hope that you are instilled with the spirit of diplomacy that permeates MMUN. With that, I declare the 61st Midwest Model United Nations Conference open.